Hi everybody, thank you so much for joining me. I'm just going to quickly add a comment in here. Tips on keeping fighting fit with transplant athlete Ellie Lacey. Hi everybody, I can see you all joining. Thank you so much. There we go, pinned. Thank you all so much for joining me. It's honestly such a pleasure to be here speaking to you from the Sports Shoes channel. So thank you. I'm going to be giving you some tips today about a couple of topics really. I'll go into those in a bit more detail, but I'll start by telling you just a little bit about myself to hopefully put those tips into a bit of context. So my name's Ellie Lacey. I am a world champion transplant runner, which still feels really odd to say because 3.5 years ago I was neither a world champion anything or a transplant recipient. 3 years ago I had catastrophic liver failure for no diagnosed reason. We never found out what happened, and I ended up being given 48 hours to live, which was pretty terrifying. Before that, I always describe myself as just incredibly normal person. So just like you guys, I was a runner. I'd spent 2016, I had a great year. I'd spent 5 months cycling across Europe with my then fiance, now husband. I'd been in Uganda for 6 weeks, setting up running the Rift Marathon. So I ran almost every day. I was really fit and active and just using my body to enable me to live the life I wanted to live. Hi guys, I can see you all still joining. It's such a pleasure. Hello, welcome. And yes, I was just a normal, at the time, 30-year-old. And then I got acute liver failure and I had, like I say, 48 hours to live. 3 things saved me: my amazing organ donor, our incredible NHS, which is getting so much praise at the moment and it could not be more deserved, and then the third thing, which I'll go into in a bit more detail later because it seems a bit off the wall, but genuinely the third thing that saved my life was running. So it's always a real pleasure to speak about it. It's also always a real pleasure to speak about organ donation because before it happened to me, I would never have thought that somebody, a transplant recipient with somebody else's organ, could be really fit and active and could go on to be a world champion athlete. So I really like sharing how special organ donation is and that it really isn't just a case of keeping people surviving. It really does give us our whole lives back. So yeah, since I had my transplant, running has been a massive part of my recovery. You can probably expect that to be physical, that's obvious. It was also and is still a mental recovery thing. It's an awful lot to have got my head around. I still haven't done a great job of that, but running is amazing for my mental health too, and I know that so many of you will feel the same, I'm sure, about how important running is for that. And in these times of isolation, it's getting harder and harder to stay running, which again I'll be talking about in a bit, how to sort of keep up with that. And so I went on to represent Team GB last year at the World Transplant Games, and there is honestly no feeling like racing for your country, holding a Union Jack above your head. It's really been really special. So yeah, running has been a huge part of my recovery and my life since transplant. So in a nutshell, that is my story, and hopefully that gives a bit of context to the tips I'm going to give you today. I see more of you are joining. Hello, welcome. Thank you so much for joining me. So yeah, the tips I'm going to give you, there are 2 sections really. The first is how to stay motivated with running when we don't have any target races at the moment. Or I suppose to put it better, what else you can target that aren't races, or what you can target while we're going through this pandemic. And then the second one, which is really close to my heart, is how to keep your body fighting fit in the face of this virus. So should you contract it, how to get your body in the best shape it can be. And I don't just mean through physical exercise, there's a bit more to it. That's a particularly important one to me, and I'll tell you more why when we get to it. But I'll start with the other things to target, of which I have 3. And I haven't just plucked these out of thin air. I genuinely do all of these, and they are really helping me at the moment because I am a massive massive race lover. I love racing against other people, and what really motivates me to go and train, and I love hard training sessions, but what motivates me to go and do them and push my body really hard is imagining that race that I'm going to compete at. So for the World Transplant Games, training was the easiest thing in the world, because I could just close my eyes before a training session and I could imagine the stadium, imagine the crowds, imagine that finish line, imagine that podium. And that made that training session just the easiest thing, made leaving the house the easiest thing. And without that, it can be quite difficult at the moment. I'm sure loads of you are finding that too. So my first tip would be to find a Strava segment near you and target it. So, for example, I live in hilly South Wales, and there are Strava segments everywhere, particularly hill ones, so from the bottom to the top of a climb, which are great to target. If you want to find segments near you, there are a couple of ways. Firstly, just upload your runs to Strava, and you can look at your run and see if you've tackled any segments there. And if so, you can look at it in more detail, and then you can target it again. If not, you can just go on the Strava desktop version, and you can go to the segment search, and you can look at all the segments around you. And thirdly, if there are none that take your fancy, or they're all hills and you want a flat one, or you live in a really flat area and you want a specific length one, you can just create your own segment, again on the desktop version of Strava. Really simple to do. So once you've found your segment or created a segment you want to target, so I found mine and I did a run through. Mine's quite a long hill climb, so my first result was 13 minutes 11 seconds. The Queen of the Mountain, so the current fastest time by a female up there, is 12 minutes 58. So I've targeted that. In 4 weeks' time I'll do it again and try and get the Queen of the Mountain. But it's really useful because not only have I got a target, but I've got some specific training to be able to do. So for me, that kind of effort would be a lot of tempo work and a lot of long intervals. And then the next segment I'm going to do is a 2-minute really steep hill. So then I can change my training up a bit, still have a target, but have something different to aim for. And that'll be a lot more shorter interval, much steeper interval work training for that one. So it really helps to mix it up. So that's a real top tip I'd give you, is to find a Strava segment, a different one I'd give 4 to 6 weeks to train for it, and then keep finding new ones to just keep mixing it up a bit. Then my second tip would be a time trial loop. Now, I should have caveated this by saying I live in rural South Wales, so I have a lot of country lanes near me and fields where I luckily rarely see people, and if I do, it's really easy to give each other a lot of space. If you live in a city or you don't have that situation, then for the Strava segment bit, you could create a new segment somewhere much quieter, or maybe try things really early in the morning. But if that's not a possibility, then these next two tips will hopefully help if you're self-isolating at home in your garden. So the second is a time trial loop. So if you are able to leave your house and garden, like I am, so I found a distance that I love running, which is about 5k. I really love pushing myself on a 5k. So I found a 5k-ish loop near me. And every month or so, I go at it full pelt. And it's really satisfying to see you getting better at it. And if you're not getting better at it, it's really useful to get a kick up the bum and try again. So it's a time trial loop you can do every month. If you can't leave your house, you can do the same thing in the garden. So X number of loops of your garden would work really well. And just time yourself. You don't even need to have a proper running watch for this one. So that's really helpful. You don't have to have it as a Strava segment either. So just a loop that really works for you. It could be much shorter than 5k. It could be much longer. But that's really useful as well, so just to track your progression. And then the third tip, and this is one that has been really good for me actually, because I am a runner who loves running, and I find it very easy to go out for a run, but I find it very difficult to do all the other stuff that us runners should do, like the strength work, like the foam rolling, oh my goodness, like yoga and Pilates and those sorts of things. I just ignore them and I use running as my excuse. But now, for me, I've got a bit more time. It might be that you've got a bit more time, or that you're not able to run as much in isolation. So it's really a good opportunity to try something new. So I've been doing some YouTube yoga lessons, which I've actually been really enjoying, even though I am horribly bad at yoga. But no one sees, so it doesn't matter. And I've also been trying to target some really weak areas. I've got horribly weak glutes, so I'm trying to target those. And I think it could be really positive that if we're in this situation, that we could even come out as better runners at the end of it, because we've been targeting things that we don't usually do. Hopefully, anyway, very optimistic. So those are my 3 tips for different things to focus on when you can't focus on a race. So find a Strava segment, mix it up and train for it specifically for every 4 to 6 weeks. Find a time trial loop that you enjoy, a distance that you enjoy, and see your progression, or keep yourself on the straight and narrow if you're falling off it a bit. And then target something else, something that could complement your running, like I say, yoga or strength work, or find something completely different that just motivates you and makes you happy. So those are my ideas for that. And now I'll move on to how to keep your body fighting fit. Now, I said at the beginning that this one it's sort of really close to my heart, and the reason for that is, in fact, before I say anything, I will just say, if you've got any questions, please whack them in and I will get to those at the end, because it's lovely to answer questions from you guys. So please do ask away anything you want. So yeah, the reason that keeping your body fighting fit is really important for me is because it's absolutely no exaggeration to say that being a runner saved my life. The doctors told me over and over and over again, both before and after my transplant, they said the only reason that you held out long enough for your organ was because you came into this being fit and healthy, you were a runner. That is a really powerful message to hear, and it has certainly kept me on the straight and narrow in the running sense ever since, because having had an organ transplant, you are very aware that your body could reject it. So I live on immune suppressing medication to make sure, well, hopefully make sure my body doesn't reject it, but it's very common that that would happen. So I feel like I have to keep my body, I want to anyway, but I feel like I have to keep my body as fit as possible, so that if I ever had to go back into that situation, I will be prepared for it. And I feel like that is more pertinent than ever right now. So we've all got this silent killer, this coronavirus, and it's a really tricky one, because we don't really know who it targets and who it affects. It's affecting more and more people outside of the extremely vulnerable category, as well as loads of us who are within it. So the best thing we can do is keep our bodies in the tip-top shape. Now, it's really important that I stress that by this I do not mean to up your training and get yourself as physically fit as possible by doing really intense sessions, loads and loads and loads. What is also really important for your body is fatigue management. So it's important to be really fit, but it's really important to not get too exhausted, because if you do and you contract coronavirus, your body is not in the best place to fight it. So my next 3 tips are about how to sort of balance out fitness and fatigue. So the first of which is exactly that: balance your training sessions. So for example, you just want to balance out the volume along with the intensity. So I love hard training sessions, but I don't go out and do a hard training session every day of the week, and I certainly don't do really long ones. At the moment, I'm being incredibly sensible. So I do 2 quite intense sessions a week, but I've reduced the volume of those. So they're really short, sharp sessions. One of those is typically a tempo, and the other one is typically a hill session. Like I say, I live somewhere really hilly, but yours could be an interval of any variety. And then the day after that, I'll give myself either a rest day or an easy run, like a 30-minute easy run, just to make sure that I'm keeping my body fit, but not too fatigued. My second tip is a really good one, actually. I love this. I've been doing this for a long time and really do see the benefits of it. Is to add sprints to your easy runs. So say, or even just one easy run a week. Say that once a week you do a 30-minute easy jog. At the end of that jog, do 4 to 6 10 to 12 second sprints with a really decent recovery between each, say like a minute's recovery in between each sprint. Now what this does is it really improves your neuromuscular memory. So it improves your form without you even thinking about it. But the best bit of it in the context of this conversation is it doesn't fatigue you at all. So quite often, even before a target race, the day before I will do 4 to 6 10 to 12 second sprints. I try and do them on a slight incline just for injury prevention, but if that's not possible for you, then it's so few sprints that it'll be fine. But I even do them the day before a race because I feel it just gives me that bit of springiness. So I add those to the end of a 30-minute run, and it does nothing in terms of fatigue, but it does a lot in terms of neuromuscular form benefits. So that's a massive one. I really recommend that. And then my final one is the one I struggle with far and away the most. I'm hoping you guys are better at this than I am already. It is nutrition. So I generally think that I eat quite healthily, but during lockdown I have really fallen off the wagon in terms of how much sugar I'm eating. So I really am having to try a lot harder with that. I still make sure I eat a lot of fruit and veg, but it's not just a case of counteracting it, I know. But your diet is so important. And then on top of that, I also supplement it with iron tablets. I generally have quite low iron, so I'd always do that. But when I'm training more, I would increase that dose. And then the other thing that I think is really important right now, especially if you can't get outside, is vitamin D supplements. I actually, because I'm immune suppressed, I shouldn't really spend a lot of time in the sun, which is quite hard as a runner, but I put very high factor sunscreen on, so I always take vitamin D supplements anyway. But if you are having to stay in more than usual, then that's a really, really useful one. Just going to have a look and see if we've got some questions. So the first one we've got is a typical training week. What does that look like for me? So that's a great question. So at the moment, I would typically have 2 really intense sessions. I would also have probably 2 steady runs. So those might look like a 40-minute steady run. So it's at that sort of sweet spot. And my 2 intense sessions, as I mentioned before, one might be a tempo of increasing time, and the other might be a hill session or interval session. And then I'd also have 2 easy runs and a rest day. So those are your 7 days. Any more questions? I'm just looking in the question bit here. So, sorry. We've got here my favourite race. Also a good one. So, in terms of races I've done, I would say the World Transplant Games. I've never raced with an atmosphere like it. In terms of my favourite race to do every year is it's actually a fell race, really local to me. I absolutely love fell racing. I love that feeling of freedom, of running up the mountains, of pushing yourself. I love how simple they are, and that it's not too fancy. You finish and you usually get like a beer and a flapjack and a pat on the back, and they cost like £3 to enter. I think fell races are just embody the kind of spirit of running and just being outdoors and loving all of that side of things. So yeah, my local fell race would be the answer to that one. So I'm going to finish up by saying a massive, massive thank you again for joining me. Just to summarise what I said, my top 3 tips to target different things are to find a Strava segment, to find a time trial that you can keep doing regularly to monitor your how your training's going, and to find something new like yoga or strength work to supplement your running if you're not able to do as much of it as possible. And my 3 tips for balancing fatigue and really being in the best shape to fight this virus would be balance intensity with volume in your training sessions, and make sure you have a good amount of rest as well. Would be to add sprints to easy runs, which is a great tip, and I really stand by that one. And then to think about your diet and if you need to supplement it, particularly with iron and vitamin D. Please share this with your friends, let them know these tips. I'll also be writing up a blog post about this, which you can find via my Instagram, which is running_the_rift. Share this, please tag Sports Shoes in it, and use the hashtag #NoFunStandingStillAtHome. More important than anything, make sure you stay safe and do running that is safe for you in the context that is safe for you. And again, thank you so much for joining me. It honestly has been such a pleasure to be able to share my insights with you. Thank you so much, and I'll see you again. Bye.